Hello, everyone. This is Heather with the Roberts Library. And make sure I've got all my windows open correctly. I hope everybody can hear me okay. If you will please use the chat and say to panelists and attendees, tell us that you're here, tell us where you're from. The Q&A tab on your Zoom screen should be for tech questions. So if you can't hear me, if your video's not working, I should be able to help you right after the introduction. So I'm starting to see some people fill up the chat, and that's great. That lets you know we're here and that we're not just talking out into space. So like I said, I am Heather Register Zabindin from the Roberts Library, and we are part of the Central Arkansas Library System. We have the Butler Center for Arkansas Studies, the Encyclopedia of Arkansas, and the galleries at Library Square, all in that big glass and metal and stone building across the street from the main library in downtown Little Rock. So this is a Zoom webinar for our Legacies and Lunch series, which is part of what the Butler Center for Arkansas Studies does. You will be able to see it if you joined the Zoom webinar, as well as see it on Facebook Live right now. It will be up on Facebook after this forever and ever, and then it'll also be on YouTube. We will post it to YouTube in probably a week. Usually it takes us. We'll take questions at the end, but you can also put questions in the chat as you go along, as you think of them. Don't think that you have to wait until the very, very end. We'll take questions in the Zoom chat as well as questions on Facebook Live. I can pull them from there. Just know that if you're on Facebook Live, there's about a 20-minute lag, so it'll take me a minute for it to all kind of catch up. Let's see. A couple of housekeeping notes for people who are Central Arkansas Library System patrons. We are doing a variety of services right now during this COVID-19 pandemic. While our buildings are closed, you can get the pickup. You can pick up items that are on hold from Monday through Saturday from 9 until 6. And so check with your local branch, call and find out about that. Also, starting June 8th, we will be doing kind of a limited opening. It'll be by appointment. Please go to cows.org to get all the details, because I don't want to tell you wrong. As with this pandemic, things change on a regular basis, so please check back there or call your local branch. Our in-person programming is suspended until the end of August, and so we're doing lots of things virtually. You can find story times, cooking lessons, and craft projects by going to cows.org or by going to the COWS YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube, search for Central Arkansas Library System, you'll find the channel. That's where everything is archived. I think we've put up like 90 or something videos since this all started at the end of March. You can also subscribe to that channel so you'll get notifications when new things go up. So we have lots of programming out there for you and your family. You can also virtually shop with the galleries at Library Square and the bookstore at Library Square. So you'll want to go to Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram to look for Roberts Library, the galleries at Library Square, and the bookstores at Library Square. They're going to be posting things that you can buy, and then you can call them, purchase them over the phone, and then they'll do curbside pickup for you. And don't forget, Father's Day is coming up. There are lots of great gifts at both places for Father's Day. Next Monday, we will have Finding Family Facts at 3 o'clock. That's our monthly genealogy program. You can sign up. It's a Zoom meeting, so you can sign up online. Go to robertslibrary.org to sign up for that. And also, Monday evening at 7 o'clock is the first in the Encyclopedia of Arkansas's pandemic series. We're calling them Monday Maladies. and they will be every other Monday at 7 o'clock. And the first one is with Tim Nutt, who's the director of the Historical Resources Center at UAMS. He's the history guy at UAMS. And he's going to talk about pandemics and the spread of disease in Arkansas. So those should be interesting and great. Again, those are Zoom webinars. You can sign up at robertslibrary.org. And we will also stream them. I think we're going to stream those on YouTube Live. I'll know more about that tomorrow. So, okay, you didn't come to listen to me or watch me. You came to hear Olly and Jan speak. So let me do a little switching up of things. We'll get them on camera. There's Olly. Take just a second to get Jan in there. There she is. Okay. Now let me do my little brief introduction for the program, and then I'm going to turn it over to them, and I will go away so y'all don't have to look at me anymore. Okay. The Central Arkansas Library System has a book division. In the past 10 years, Butler Center Books has published over 64 titles about Arkansas history and culture. Outspoken, here it is, Outspoken, the Olly Neal story, is our most recent title. It was due to hit shelves in May, but due to the pandemic and pandemic-related delays with our printer, it will be available in the next couple of weeks. We actually received notice yesterday that the books have been printed and are being shipped. Olly's road to success was not a smooth one, and his story is unique, and he tells it with humor, candor, and hard-earned wisdom, explaining his rocky journey from hard scrambled beginnings in rural Lee County to the role of prosecutor to the judicial bench. In weekly conversations over several years, Neal told the story of his life and his friends told the story of his life to his friend and former colleague, Jan Wrede, who captured his words and shaped them into what has become his autobiography. The books will be available from online retailers, as well as the U of A Press and local booksellers. When I stop talking, I will actually put in the chat some links that will take you directly to where you can purchase a copy of the book, and I'll put those both on Zoom and Facebook. So now a little bit about our speakers. Olly Neal Jr., a courageous activist for civil and political change, led the Lee County Cooperative Clinic through its contentious founding years in the 1970s, directed the National Demonstration Water Project, and championed public health in the Delta. He participated in major voting rights litigation, became the first Black district prosecuting attorney in Arkansas, and served as a notable circuit and appellate court judge. Jan Wrede, a high school science teacher, was one of the Vista Health advocates who devised the plan for an outpatient clinic in Lee County, Arkansas in the 1970s. Later, she became an environmental educator and writer with 2 books published by the Texas A&M University Press. So please help me give Olly and Jan a big virtual welcome. Now, let me turn it over to you guys.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
So I guess I'm supposed to start, like always, Olly, with some questions.
It's all right.
Uh-huh.
Consistent with the last 5 years or so.
Uh-huh, that's right. We're familiar with that, aren't we?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And I think probably we should start by addressing some of the things that have been going on today and maybe a little bit of how they have affected us are you and are relate to what you have written in this book. So maybe we can start with what has happened to George Floyd by the hand of a policeman in Minnesota, and a little bit about living in a racist society.
Yeah, for me at 78, the George Floyd story is just a repetition, basically. But part of what makes it significant, or at least frustrates me more, is I've got little nieces and granddaughters, 12, 13, and 14, who just have difficulty trying to figure out how to work through this. I don't have good answers for them, and that's frustrating to me too, even though a lot of things I don't have answers for. But I don't have good answers. I can't tell them with great sincerity that in a little while this will all be over. It seems to me that it won't. But there does appear to be some differences here now. I have to tell you that I'm kind of a political addict, and Mitch McConnell said something that was reasonably responsible 6 or 7 days ago. But what I think what my folks, what all of my friends and non-friends seems to concentrate on, they think this is just a police problem. And it is not just a police problem. The police represent the folk they work for. And the folk they work for established a policy that controls the conduct of the police. And while we will say all kinds of things about some bad apple, the fact of the matter is we don't change the institutional standards that would get rid of those bad apples. I've seen very few, I have a personal friend or two of police officers, but very few police officers have said that this guy was wrong, or this guy did something bad, or the guy in Georgia, the guys who in Georgia were not police officers but close to the prosecutor did something bad, or the guys in Kentucky did something bad. Police don't seem to get that. But I guess I've got so much hope built in, and always had some, that I still think there's something different about this. Now on Saturday Night Live, they made a real joke to say nothing is going to change. But I think there may be something different about this, because there is a conversation going now among many people, including people that I was surprised to hear from, that recognize that we've got a deep-seated problem here that may be, now I'm not a psychologist, not a historian, I just had some work experiences, but what we may have here is a situation many of us believe is based on a threat to my white friends who think many of the particularly the diehard Trump supporters, that what is happening in this country, it is no longer going to be a majority white country, and that's a serious threat that should be put off as long as it can. And there are those who are saying that, including some well-recognized educators who are certainly not known for being screamers.
Right. Fundamental. So let's, what I'd like to do now, Olly, is move on and talk a little bit about the book, and then maybe come back to this at the end, right? After we've made some, some points about the book. Yes. Okay, so going back to 5 years ago when we met the first time, I can remember you were a little reluctant, but things moved along really well in our conversations. And so I have to ask you, why was it important to you to write the book? How did you decide to actually commit to it and get involved? Do it.
Let's talk about that in two parts. Let's talk about first why just generically I wanted to write a book, and then how you and I got together. Because that's important to me too, and I think significant for those who, at least, I don't know that I represent an example of anything, Jan, to be quite frank with you. But I think I've tried to find a way to navigate our system and not be angry all the time, and not be in a position where I'm at a point of either killing somebody or somebody's killing me. And I think that's a pretty good, that's a pretty good accomplishment jump to make, if you can do that. If you can stay I don't know how close I stayed to sanity, so I won't try to get into that. But I, in about when I turned 70, that was about 2011 or somewhere. I was diagnosed in 2010, late 2010, with rheumatoid arthritis. In all of 11, I was in great pain, hurting all the time because this rheumatoid arthritis was not controlled, and the doctors were working at different kinds of schemes to get it under control. I was taking something called hydrocodone, which relieved the pain some, but I tell you, there's not a drug of choice for me. Not even if I'm in pain, if I can find another way to get around it. Of course, I have asthma that acted up this time, and I'd come off of my last years at the Court of Appeals in a state of kind of depression, of a serious extreme of paranoia, and so I knew I needed to try to say. So I had to look at my life. I wanted to see what it is that this life had meant. I mean, I'd gone through these things that for me were real big and important, not so much for a lot of other people, but for me. And I wanted to sort of see, was there any meaning at all to that? Was there anything that I could say to somebody else coming along who was trying to have the same kind of impact that I was failing to have, or at least desired to have, but not doing so well? Could I give them something to look at? Could I remind them of some difficulties they would run into? Could I point out some failings that I had that would be useful to them so that they could dodge them? That's where I was. And so my first thought was, getting into the part of how you and I get together, was to try to find my brother Prentice. I have a brother Prentice who was actively involved, as you'll see in the book, actively involved and really managed and made happen the boycott, the Marianna boycott in 1971 and 2. Wanted to find Prentice. Prentice is 7 years old, younger than me, and he has sort of been lost from the family for the last 10, 12, 15 years. Because Prentice he had a degree in English and composition, that sort of thing, and he wrote well. And the beautiful thing about it is he could see through whatever images and shows I put up. He saw right through them and told me what was going on in my head and heart. And I kind of appreciated that. And so he also had this great dream in his life of writing this great bestseller, a novel probably, but we couldn't find him. And then in 12, I believe it was, at the Lee County Cooperative Clinic's 42nd reunion,
That's right.
saw Jan, and I was reminded of how impressed I was with working with Jan in 6 months or so, 8 months, 6 months of actual work and 8 months of knowing each other with Lee County Cooperative Clinic in late '69 and the first half of 1970. And Jan's style was always an impressive one to me. It was not, even though I think she's a brilliant woman, I say that in her presence, she didn't laud it. She didn't say, you got to buy this, because here it is. Here I come from on high to bring you the world, the facts of the world. But that didn't come to me in 2012 for us to write a book together. I don't know exactly how that came to be suggested, but somehow we got to talking about it within the next 2 years. And it was, to me, an easy choice. And no Prentice, but Jan Wrede would be excellent, because I thought she didn't know all of my history, but she knew how I operated from that work with Lee County Cooperative Clinic. And it was not always what I suspect she would have approved of. But I think she was like I believe that some of my friends and colleagues that I've worked with and against over the years, she understood that I had to do what I had to do because I was the one in the circumstances much more deeply than she was. And so while I don't think she always agreed with what my approach was, I think she did, and she affirms that she did not. But she did understand that I had to make some choices. I had to figure out how to do this thing myself. And therefore, she was somebody I was pleased to have when either she suggested, I don't know who suggested, how we first talked. But my only hesitation then was that I was in fairly poor health, I thought. Probably most of it was in my head. And I wasn't sure I'd be able to be responsible all the time and follow through all the time with what our obligations were to each other to make this thing happen. But for the last 4.5 years, it has worked out extremely well. We've talked every Tuesday. I think we've missed 2 Tuesdays.
That's
One of them was my fault, and one of them was something she had to do. It may have been 3.
Olly, I can tell you, I went to your daughter Karama first before I came to you in 2015, and when we met in Little Rock and made that schedule to talk every Tuesday. Karama, I talked to Karama first, and I think I was hoping she would help you say yes.
Well, she didn't have to push me. I will say because as I said, I mean, I was not enthusiastic about getting into an arrangement with somebody that I was not going to be comfortable with. So I felt the comfort all up from the beginning.
Okay. So now let's jump into the big stuff. What do you personally consider to be your big, most important accomplishment?
When my friends see me now from all over the country, and I've got a big mouth, I've done a little bit of travel. I've been to all 50 states, so not travel for important things, but traveling and seeing my friends. They say that the wonderful thing is you were an appellate judge. Some of my friends thought who live in East Arkansas in the first judicial circuit said, man, you were a superior circuit judge, and that's really where you made your contribution. And I've had conversations with people who thought I walked a pretty good line to be the prosecuting attorney. But the most important work I did in my life, from my perspective, the most important, the most valuable, the most meaningful work I did was working to help start and create a circumstance where Lee County Cooperative Clinic could remain viable. That is the work that I have taken the greatest pride in. Didn't make the greatest money, didn't do a number of things that somebody would say you need to do, but it was a work that was directly related to the folk I believe in. And that's really a part of mine, probably puts a real limit on what kinds of things I can do, is I really do need to be fairly close to the folk I'm trying to impact. I'm not a person who feel the most comfortable when I'm trying to impact somebody by way of a weapon there. But I feel better if I'm talking to a group of folk. I can walk into the audience, somebody can say, well, why the hell did you say that? And I can sort of respond and be as transparent as I possibly can. That's where I feel like I'm most effective. And at Lee County Cooperative Clinic, I think I was at whatever life gave me, I was at my best.
At your best. And I mean, and what about, well, the clinic's still there.
And see, growing out of that experience, and I'm going to mention some folks' names. I didn't call them and ask them. I probably ought to do that, but they've known me for 40 years, 50 years, and they know that I just say what comes to my mind. I've seen some people, now this is the hope that's in me, Jan. Some of my friends say you're foolish to be hopeful, but I've seen what I consider to be significant change, not the change sufficient in the attitude of some people I've worked with that were not somebody I would have counted on anyway when we started. Jesse Daggett, who's a lawyer in Marianna. As a matter of fact, I had a good kind of running battle with Jesse's father. But Jesse's somebody I believe understands how come I've got to think like this. And that to me is a real step, because Marianna is not some star on the hill that brings all the light. Bob Donovan, another white lawyer in Marianna, I think they understand. I'm not talking about the folk who we've tried to help move into positions of control, but I think they understand that it's important for people like me to be treated in the exact same way they would treat their cousin who moved into town, and anything less is going to be unacceptable, and they've got to tolerate, if they're going to stay around, that result of that unacceptability. That is, my communication with them was not always, well, y'all be nice and let's be nice. It was the kind of thing that, as Heather pointed out, I was a little profane, a little vulgar as I dealt with my colleagues and friends, not always up to the standards of a responsible appellate judge. So the second thing coming out of that, in that the local experience, was the people who I think really did come to understand, not necessarily agree completely now, but understand this is something we've got to live with, we've got to deal with if there's going to be any kind of meaningful existence with all of us here together. Now, of course, Marianna and Lee County is different from the state of Arkansas, this country. Marianna and Lee County, the racial population is about balanced. That's about 60% black and 40% white, roughly. So that so that I guess that makes it easier for a white person to say, I've got to figure out if I'm going to stay in this county, I've got to figure out how to deal with these black folk. And this country, Brother Trump says, all you have to do is dominate. Bring it to 82nd Airborne. I mean, that's, and he can get away with that. They could not get away with that in Marianna. The police department wasn't big enough, wasn't smart enough, didn't have enough guns. Everybody knew where everybody lived. So the second important thing it seems to me is that there's been some growth. I was particularly impressed one time, and I was not impressed at the time it occurred, but in 2012, Bob Donovan called me and said, now you got to keep in mind the context here. In Marianna, I was considered the boogeyman. That is, in 1970, I was considered the worst thing that ever happened to Marianna. I was going to cause the full and complete destruction of the county. I was the worst thing that could possibly come along. In 2012, Bob Donovan called me and said, the Lee County Bar, which is basically white lawyers, said that they wanted to put up a plaque recognizing my contribution to the judiciary in the courthouse. Now, there's no plaque representing any lawyer in the courthouse in Lee County. He said they recognized that there had never been from the county of Lee a lawyer who had been a prosecuting attorney, a circuit judge, and an appellate judge. And they thought that warranted some notice to the people of Lee County and the folk who came to the courthouse. Now, my first thought was, that's because of my own mental problem, but was that what scheme is coming here now to, and what is this going to do to me? What are they planning to do to me? But my good friend Wilbur Peel counseled me, said, just be quiet and listen and watch. And that's what I did. And that appeared on the wall over there, a plaque with my photograph and this little description of my governmental work. That is the Vietnam service, the prosecuting attorney, circuit judge, and appellate judge. So to me, that was a real mark of some change, because in 1970, there's no way in God's green earth could anybody have agreed to put a black person's picture in the courthouse in Lee County, Arkansas. Now,
No way.
I don't know how important it is, but I'm just telling you the kind of things that impacted on Olly Neal and my survival.
Good. That's good. Yeah, I went and saw that plaque not terribly long ago. It's still there. So I want to talk a little bit about the hard times. What were the hardest years for you? I know a lot of years weren't easy, but what were the very hardest?
Well, it's an interesting thing that the most productive years were probably the hardest. That is because I was always, that's the Lee County Cooperative Clinic start. I started talking to, based on my memory, I started talking to you and Corrine. Corrine was a nurse who, with Jan, developed a concept for Lee County Cooperative Clinic. I started talking to you and Corrine, I believe, in October of 1969. It may have been November, but I believe it was October. I was working at a little organization in Memphis. From the period of time when I came to Marianna and started working in March of 70, it was always very hard. It was very hard because I had to always be conscious that not only could we lose this struggle to start this clinic, but I could be killed. I mean, in 71, it became clean knowledge that there was a hit out on me and my brother Prentice. We actually talked to the boy that we believe had the assignment and had been paid $500. And we were being as we were, and that was the toughness I'm talking about that I had to show all the time, encouraged him to leave Lee County because he represented something dangerous in Lee County, and he did. Now, those were times that those are times of conflict being between, I would rather live just a comfortable life and drink a little whiskey and laugh and have a good time and party. But you can't exactly party when you got to look to make certain nobody's behind you. I remember driving from Jack Nash in Lee County back to Marianna one night after a meeting, and some boys dropped in behind me. Now, the intelligent thing to do would have been to speed up and run. But I also knew that my car was driving a little Chevrolet that wasn't that fast. And so my thought was, you can't do that. So I stopped and come out of the car real fast with the shotgun off the back seat, pump shotgun, and at the same time jacking around into the chamber. The boys were just silly little boys, taught to be damn fools. And so they were glad to get away without being shot. I was glad for them to get away, because I wasn't looking for them, but I had to appear to be. Those were hard times. I mean, hard on your sanity. Now, the hardest work, though, was being prosecuting attorney. That was more mental. This was physical, what I'm talking about earlier, because your life is on the line. The being prosecuting attorney was mental. We had to figure out how. Some of these were the same people, or represented some of the same people that had done me all kinds of dirt. But it was my job, as I saw it, different from some of my friends, it was my job to say, I'm going to treat you, when you appear in this court, when you appear on this criminal docket, I'm going to treat you the same way I treat my nephew. And I've got a nephew who appears on the docket, not in Lee County, but on the docket somewhere regularly. And I want him to be treated fairly. I don't want somebody abusing and misusing him. And so that's what I had to do, not just with the black boys, but with the white boys. So that was a difficult, because that required me to overcome what I ask my white friends to do all the time. Overcome your upbringing, overcome what you've always been taught. And that's what this thing is really about. I don't know how much we accomplish in any of this. I mean, Lee County is a zero county, no employment, nothing going on there that looks well. It looks like it's kind of, we're probably going to lose the school district. I don't know what we've accomplished, but that's what I did. That's my thinking.
So staying with the years as prosecutor, Olly, I understand that was very hard mentally and emotionally for you. How did you stay connected to your people when you were prosecuting so many black kids, black boys?
Yeah, I think that's a significant question. Rodney Slater asked 2-3 years ago, asked me that very question. Rodney Slater is a former secretary. Rodney is from Marianna. I think the answer really is, and obviously I don't know absolutely, I'm not that good, but I think the answer is that I was as transparent as one could possibly be. That is, when I was toying with what to do with somebody, I talked through this whole thing with my black folks. I had a case, for example, and I don't have the virus. I'm an asthmatic. But I had a case, the best example of it is a case I had down to Phillips County, involved a young white man who was a police officer. He was at schools had integrated. This is like 91 or 92, I think early 92. The schools were integrated. So much hell had been raised, they could no longer have if it was a public school event, it couldn't be a white one and a black one. They had to have it together. And of course, the kids were tired of that stuff anyway. And so at this little dance, this little black boy was dancing with his daughter. And I know all of you have never been teenagers, so you've always danced with at least 12 inches between you. But young kids don't always do that. I didn't. But this young black boy was dancing with this little white girl who was a policeman's daughter. Now the policeman was there as a chaperone, not as a police officer, as a chaperone. And they were not dancing wide apart. They were holding each other rather closely. And the police officer went crazy. He couldn't stand it. So he snatched the little boy and slapped him. Well, they brought it to me. Deputy prosecutor in Phillips County didn't know what the hell to do with it. He said, Olly, it's yours. You the prosecutor. Deputy prosecutor was a good man, by the way, Ashley Higgins. But he said, this is yours. It's yours. And so what I had to decide, now here's a cop who had not been a nice cop. This was not one of the cops you said is a decent guy. It was a low down cop. But the question is, what do you charge him with? And how hard do you pursue those charges? Because you know he's somebody you don't like. What I've been saying to my white friends who serve as judges and prosecutors earlier is that you got to treat me right, whether you like me or not. That's what I said. And so I refused. My black friend said, you got to, excuse my language, you got the son of a bitch. You got him. Charge him with battery first. Well, battery first has a definition that this didn't meet, but we certainly could have made it in some money, because for most of you who understand it, prosecutors in Arkansas have some extremely large discretion. They decide who to charge, what to charge, when to negotiate, how hard to pursue it. I refused to charge him with battery second, refused with battery first, refused to charge him with battery second. There was no injury, there was no permanent results. There was some mad people. When mad people don't get you, battery second or battery third. So I charged him with a battery second or battery first. I charged him with battery third. My folks didn't understand that. I sat down and went through, just like I'm going to do this now. And you know I've got a loud mouth. In a church there, I sat down and went through this just like that. Just like I did, just like I'm doing now. I can't tell them to treat me right, whether you like me or not, and then turn around and act different. Because first place, it doesn't have any longevity, that approach doesn't, because there's no way I could be prosecutor beyond December of 1992, and there was no way if we did about a black elected prosecutor attorney within that district at that time. So what would we accomplish? We would accomplish my getting some feeling of revenge and nothing more, and that ain't worth enough. So that's an example of how difficult it was for me functioning as a prosecuting attorney. Right. I mean, it was just hard.
Right. Well, and so you've told us about the hard work at the clinic and the mental hard difficulties of prosecuting attorney. So, and now you're in your 70s. So you can look back and tell us, what were the personal costs that you have paid for that stress, that conflict?
Well, you know, I now occasionally, for a time, I had a regular counselor. I know that my paranoia, my counselor tells me that the paranoia I developed became so extreme that if you came to my door, I immediately assumed that you were there to somehow cause me great harm. Came out of trying to figure out a walk a line between taking on what I thought somebody deserved and doing what was right and in the best interest in the long term for the folk I thought I represented. So that conflict there, I think was a part of what put me into my depression and my extreme paranoia. Even when I served on the Court of Appeals, a very sophisticated job. I tell the story, and I think I tell it in the book. Some of this stuff, Jan, if you'll remember, if you'll tell me if I didn't tell it in the book. But when I first came onto the Court of Appeals, Jim Guy Tucker made me aware. He was appointed me in November of 1995. And so I had to put together a staff. Now I should tell you, in all honesty, I'm not a super lawyer. I was not a brilliant lawyer. I had more nerve than most. And of course I understand basics. I understand the basics of the law quite well. But I am not a super lawyer. So I knew I wanted a staff of people who knew more law than I knew and knew how to find it faster than I could. So I wanted clerks. We would authorize 2 clerks and 1 administrative assistant. Well, no question about an administrative assistant. It's going to be a young lady who would serve as my secretary during my law practice, who helped carry me when I was acting stupid and doing pitiful, and probably helped facilitate me getting married the last time. Well, she was in. She's a black woman named Patricia Lamar.
Say your name, Olly.
Patricia Lamar.
Right.
So there was no question about that. That was not a guess. The only question about that was whether she would accept and move to Little Rock. She did. That was settled. Now the law clerks were a little bit different. Of course, I'd like to have law clerks that I was just comfortable with. But the most important thing for me was they had to have an absolute commitment to knowing what the law was at the moment in time. That is keeping very current. They had to be what I call have great integrity as relates to their commitment to the law, what the law said. And then secondly, I needed at least 1 clerk who had some experience with appellate law. The reason for that was, during the course of my practice, as I said, I was not a great lawyer. My reputation came from the cases I did at the trial level, not at the appellate level. I probably hadn't handled more than a dozen appeals in that entire 15 years. So I wanted somebody who was familiar with how the appellate process works pretty good and what kinds of things make good play there. And so somebody told me about this young man who had worked for Tom Glaze when Tom Glaze was trying to integrate the court up there a little bit, the Supreme Court. His name was Danny Williams. And so Danny said he was interested. That settled that. There was no question about that, because Danny had, if he clerked for Tom Glaze, I knew Tom Glaze and I didn't agree politically on a lot of stuff, but I knew Tom Glaze was a stickler for the law. So I knew that he would have the right kind of background. Didn't care whether I liked him or not. He was interested in the main because he was from the Delta, he was from Osceola, and he'd like to be able to clerk for this new black appellate judge. And so I was glad to get him. And the second clerk was somebody who came to me with good credentials, but she was strongly recommended by a young man who is now a circuit judge in East Arkansas. Dion Wilson recommended her and felt very strongly about it. And she was from the Jefferson County area. By the way, she's now a circuit judge in the 2nd Judicial Circuit. So Tanya Alexander was the second clerk. Well, so I announced to the administrative, the lawyer who sort of serves as administrator for the Court of Appeals, sent her the names of my people and their resumes, and to secure appropriate stuff for them to do, as you have to do to get your staff in place. I learned that they up there having a meeting on me. They said we just too dark down on that end where he is, because all 3 of these people were black. Well, it just so happens at that time that there was on the Supreme Court, one of the brightest lawyers the Supreme Court has ever had, probably one of the brightest appellate judges we've had in the state, period. That was Andrea Roth. Andrea Roth knew all the law, not like me. So when Andrea Roth heard these questions about that I was hiring too many black people, she checked the law, and there was a statute, which I would have never thought about, never saw, that said that the Supreme Court should draw up and present, the administrative officer of the court, rather, should draw up and present to the Supreme Court a summary of the diversity issues, that is, diversity representations, who's employed, what race, and so forth, sex. Turn out that the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, between those 6 on each court at that time, between those 12 judges, that means that there were 24 clerks and 12 administrative assistants. There was one, I repeat, one person of color. That was a black girl that Roth had working on her staff named Danielle Walker. She's a practicing attorney well known here in Little Rock now. The court showed that they had a janitor, black janitor, Mr. Price, who just died a few weeks ago. And they had an assistant librarian, a young lady named Hampton. Now, that was not necessarily the most positive thing to say about the court. So without me having to say a word, and without Roth having to do anything stupid like I would have done, like hollering and cussing, Roth just handled about it and it quieted down, and I didn't hear about it until I got over there. That's the kind of thing we got to figure out how to deal with. I mean, the first reaction was, he's hiring too many black people. Is that any question are you hiring too many white people? I'm glad to say that when I left the court, I left Patricia Lamar, Pat Lamar, still at the court, and the guy who took the actual office, I think whether he took the office or not, he took the position I had, who is now a federal judge, continued to employ Pat as an administrative assistant, which is the first white judge up there to have a black administrative assistant out of the whole 12 plus 7. That is 7 on the Supreme Court and 12 on the Court of Appeals.
Okay, I'm not quite sure how much time we have here, but I have to point out something here, Olly. I'm going to take advantage of you a little bit now. I want to point out to our listeners that Olly slid away from the question. And because I was asking about personal costs that he's paid for living a life of conflict. Oh, see, I see your smile now. And this is something that he does, that he has done through the years. But I caught him on this, and it's in the book. You don't have to talk about it now, Olly. His mental health problems resulting from his life of conflict are in the book. So go there if you want to read about it. You don't have to talk about it, Olly.
Thank you.
You're
That's
welcome.
why you're worthwhile.
And what, so now sort of in conclusion, perhaps, what I'd like to ask is where you find your hope for the future.
My logic teaches me that my logic tells me that we're probably not going to get anywhere too fast. This country spent more than 400 years practicing and codifying and perfecting its system of dehumanizing black folk. And so it's probably not logical when I think about it logically, but when I read just Olly Neal, I do have hope. And the hope is in that, for purposes of this discussion, I'll name you three people that give me that hope. One is my daughter, Karama. Now, Karama is academically, her IQ is probably 30 to 40 points higher than mine. And so she reads, understands at a level that's substantially superior to me. And so she can grasp and grab much bigger issues. And she therefore can present them in such a way that even the hard-hearted has to say, well, hell, that makes sense. So I think Karama's she's doing some work. She works with I don't know whether or not how much evidence I'm supposed to put out here today, but so I'm not going to call, but she works for an institution that in the money business, and she works with people trying to break out of the low income situation. She's done some things independently, including convince the legislature, which I couldn't get done, by the way, convince the legislature to change the way air property passes down, which is a very significant thing. People refer to her to call me and say, well, is that your daughter? Well, she's a fine young lawyer. I hesitate to tell them, I wouldn't tell them that she's not a lawyer. She has a PhD in genetics, but she has good sense. She gives me a lot of hope because she's pushing, she's committed, and she has a system that does not require her to go quite as crazy, I don't think, as I had to go. There's a young lady who's running the health center now who is, I think, really does have the kind of commitment that I think we began with, that Jan and Corrine thought we ought to have back in 1969. Her name is Dr. Kelly Mitchell Farris. Dr. Farris is doing what I think a yeoman's job of making that health center relevant to more than just presenting pain and illness, making it do something about the health of the community, doing more than I was able to do. She has a doctorate in the healthcare arena, so right. I guess she's supposed to do more than I knew to do, since I didn't have a bachelor's at the time. And the third person is somebody who I worry, though I'm gonna tell a little of his business, and he did give me permission to. This young man I semi-raised. His name is Jan Wrede. Jan Wrede has done extremely well in the corporate world. He makes a good change of money, a good piece of money now. But he's also absolutely committed to bring along other people who come out of situations he come out of, and he came out of an extremely difficult situation. I worry a little bit about Jan Wrede because I think he is so intense that he's gonna have some of the same problems I have, but he's already started doing some counseling to make certain he kind of stay on track. Those three people, I think, are the best examples I can give about why they're not the only people, they're just the ones who are closest to me, who sort of come out from under my word. Karama, Kelly Mitchell, and Nairi K. Billups.
Good. Yeah, good people. There's hope in the young people, that are coming up behind you.
Yes.
So Heather, I had one last thing I wanted to say, but I don't know if this is the appropriate time or not.
Go for it.
Okay. I've been very upset these days with the George Floyd killing, but it has raised the awareness among so many people of the fact that we live in a racist society, and we all are part of this racist culture. And so I want to speak to the white people who are listening now. And I know there are many good white people out there listening and wanting to know, what can I do to help to end racism? And one answer, I've been reading a lot, one answer from wise people today is, it's good for us to understand what it is like to be Black in America, to educate ourselves. And of course, my advice now is to start, you might start anyway, by reading OUTSPOKEN.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. It's a story of this one black man who had a big, loud mouth and
Yes.
spoke up for his people. And I was proud to be part of the story too. So there you go.
Thank you,
Well,
Jan.
thank you,
Thank you,
Jan.
Heather.
Thank you, Olly. Okay, we have a couple of questions. I've got a couple of hands raised in the participant field. So if you have your hand raised, we're not going to take any online questions. You'll need to type them in the chat. I'll read them, and then Olly and Jan will answer live. So, but those just may be hands raised saying that they're here as well. I can never tell. So, first of all, your daughter says in the chat that that she thanked you, but then she also says that she's happy to work for Southern Bancorp Community Partners. So she's okay if you said that. And she also emailed me earlier, and you know, she said she'd like you to talk a little bit about your collaboration and your writing process. I mean, you've talked a little bit about it, that you talked every day, but Jan, did you record the conversation? Not every day, you talked every week. Did you record the conversations? Did you write them down in longhand? How did y'all do that?
Well, it was tedious. The fun part was talking, asking questions and listening to Olly. And what I did is recorded every conversation, and they will be archived actually at the Butler Center, recorded and transcribed them. So I wrote them out. And then when it got time to write the book, I would pick out his words and then go back sometimes and ask more questions about something that he had slipped away from. Because he became more honest, more complete. I don't know, it's more complete in his answers as he became more confident in me and in the process. Also, I went and interviewed a lot of other people to corroborate that he was telling me the truth. But I found one time when he made a mistake in 5 years. So
just one. That's good. That's a really good rate, actually. So we have one question from early on in the discussion. This person says, Attorney Neal, as African Americans, we as families have to teach our children, grandchildren, nieces, etc., when they are young children growing up, the truth about American society. Do you agree? Why and why not? Why or why not?
I agree absolutely. I think, notwithstanding the fact that I had a fairly extensive period, maybe it's continuing now with mental health problems because of trying to deal with the truth. I think a meaningful life has to be based on truth. And I just do not believe that we should teach our children some falsities that will leave them wide open to get slammed in a circumstance where they have no preparation, no mental stamina to respond and deal with it. So I think absolutely, my daughter is listening now. One of the interesting things about this is my daughter and I were not raised she was not raised in my household. I was in Marianna when she was born, and she was here in Little Rock. And when she would come visit me, I would take her to the joints. Now, not at night when they were fighting and stuff, but take her to the joints in the daytime to have lunch. And she would maybe be playing the blues, and she would hear other more boys talk. And her mama was a good woman, the best woman in the world for raising that child. But her mama was not too enthusiastic about that. But my view was that she really needed to know what these folks, I don't care how brilliant she became, it was going to be hard for her to be able to pass for white. And so since she was going to have to be black, treated that way by white people in circumstances, time and time again, she needed to be as prepared as she could be for that. Now, I didn't think that all the way through like that, but that is clearly, I think you have to teach these children the truth now. You have to teach them that they can work through it. You have to give them examples of folk who worked through it. Hopefully you can find some that have done better than me. The guy I point to all the time, I'm talking to a lawyer, I guess, is Charles Hamilton Houston. But I don't encourage people to check all of his life, because Charles Hamilton Houston was probably one of the most brilliant black lawyers in terms of charting a path for us to get out of segregation. But he also died at 50-some years old, in part because of his lifestyle. and he didn't have that great a relationship with his family, as I understand, because he was going crazy. But you still got to teach him the truth.
Good.
We have a question about the story, about the book and the librarian, but I'm going to skip forward because I'm going to share the StoryCorps video on the feed so people can see it, people can go there, because I want to get to some of these other questions. And it is for those that don't know, the StoryCorps animated this little bit with Olly and his daughter, and it's fabulous. Let's see, could you please comment on the challenges the concerned citizens of Lee County faced in their attempt in 1970 to elect some Blacks to political office in Lee County, and the current national political landscape, apparent challenges emerging in the 2020 national election? And
that has to be from Sterling King.
I was about to say that he signed Sterling King Jr., so I'm guessing y'all know him.
Yeah, Sterling King Jr., I should give context. Sterling is my high school classmate. He and I were not big friends in high school because he was always a sharp student and did all that he was supposed to do. And I did as much as I could that I wasn't supposed to do. And I would be mad at him because he would always be prepared in class, and I was not quite so prepared. And I didn't want nobody beating me no way. But anyway, Sterling's a great guy. He worked with us in 1970 in that election. The book has a long section in it about the election of 1970.
Yeah,
I think I try to be fairly brief on it. I think that what we did was profound. We found a way to do what many communities had been unable to do. We found a way to bring in close to 90% of the Black people to be committed to a cause that we had going, when most of the time and part of this cause required us to walk through threats on our lives, threats on the community, threats on folks that had little jobs, loss of jobs, and those folks stayed with us. Generally, what the white power has been able to do is been able to split us up because they abuse and use some of the people they've got under their control. But the best good example I can give is one guy named Piston Brady. And I should point out that Piston Brady was probably one of the strongest and most effective advisors I had, even though nobody knows that other than me, perhaps, because Piston was not an educated man, didn't look like it, didn't run around among educated people. But Piston understood so much so well that he is one who advised me on several the appointments I took that were getting me out of my comfort zone. But what Piston did, Piston in 1970 ran for Justice of Peace. He ran against a white man who was a pretty large farmer, a man named Whitehead. Mr. Ed Whitehead was a pretty big farmer, had been JP for 15 or 20 years, and that seat belonged to Mr. Whitehead. Brady beat him, and he was called in by a man who was leading the Democratic Party. I think he's a junior. His son, I think, is a third, who's a lawyer in Marianna now. I get along with him all right. All these folk, I call their name, and you can tell them I call their name. But this is Dan Pelton Jr. was a chairman that was big in the Democratic Party, and he called Brady in and said, Pitts, you need to tell him you declined to accept this election and going back to on your business. And Pitson was not what you and I would describe as appropriate to have. What he should have done is told him to go to hell. No, Pitson said, now, Mr. Dan, now, sir, Mr. Dan, I promised to Mr. Dan, now, sir, Mr. He gave all the appropriate props to Mr. Dan being a big and important white man. But he didn't resign. He didn't decline. And so by the time Piston took office January 1st, he was notified that a loan he had on a 160-acre farm he owned. He had a loan at that time. I can't remember the amount of the loan. I think it was $18,000 because he came to me to borrow it. I didn't have it. So even though I was a big mouth, I didn't have no money. He was paying 6% interest. The loan was called, I cannot say that Dan Pelton calls that, but I can tell you that the loan was current, but it had a provision where they could call it when they wanted to. The loan was called, he ended up having to borrow some money, paying 15 to somewhere between 15 and 18% in order to get out of that deal. And of course, Brady then, for the next 2 years, you didn't see him in town. He was on that farm making certain that everything went perfectly to pay off that loan. The only time he came to town was for JP meetings, Justice of Peace meetings. My point is that people stood like that, Piston Brady, Thomas Ishmael, those people stood up in circumstances. I.V. McKenzie, who's deceased now, I.V. must have 7 or 8 children. I don't know how many he got. But I.V. Had his children threatened, all kinds of things. I should call him Reverend McKenzie. I don't have no disrespect at all. But he was somebody I grew up with. These people really did stand. Some of the people who were more educated, Tony Hobbs, who was a teacher in the school system at that time, an educator, got himself completely, intimately involved, just deeply involved, and refused to back out. Of course, he ended up having to find another job, which he was able to do. So what we had going with us for us was that those people stayed. Now, what does that say? What does that say to the world today? I don't know what it's. Sterling is an international person. I'm not. Sterling was always invited to have every club. I know what it says for a little bitty community, but I don't know what it says for a larger community. I believe right now the sheriff of Lee County is a black man, a good friend of mine, O.C. Banks. We have members of the quorum court are black. We have members of the city council black. The majority of the school district covers the entire county. The majority of those board members are black. Now they're not doing all they ought to do. So if I tell you by saying they're black, that means they're perfect. I'm lying to you. We have to work on ourselves. But nonetheless, black folks are participating at that level. Now, do we have any money? We ain't figured that out. We were not brilliant enough to figure out how to make these black folks make money. That's a zone that Karama has to figure out. She's in banking, as she announced to you. They can figure out how to get folks money, wealth building. But so what it has nationally, I don't know. I know that we locally, you've got to figure out a way to get along with people. Sterling King in 1970 had an innate ability to deal with black preachers. He turned out to be a preacher himself now. He's pastored for 30 years almost, and he's retired now. He has some health problems. He's probably not, I think he told me last night, he probably would not be on this program today, but he will send his question in. Part of the way you do that, though, is you can't be, those of us who get pretty big like to be able to send words, so I said so-and-so, and I'm important enough where you jump because I said it. I know that person who has what I think is zero going on still is a full and complete human being that has as much right to have an opinion as I have with my degree and my retired appellate judgeship behind my name. So what it does nationally, I'm not the one. We'll have to talk to some of my folks who went with Bill Clinton in '92 to Washington and learned about the national scene. Wilbur Peel, we'll get him on here. Wilbur Peel can tell you something about what to do nationally. Because he still deals with the national politics.
Well, we have dozens more questions, but we have to end it here, and I hate to have to end it here. So I guess we're just going to have you back. People are going to have to buy the book. They're going to read the book, and then we're going to have you back, and then they can ask more questions then. This has been great. Thank you so much, Olly and Jan. We really appreciate it. It's been such a great honor and privilege to work with you on this book. For participants on the Zoom webinar, you will get an email from us with a survey about the program, basically to help the library system know if we're doing it right, if you like what we're doing. So you'll get that in an email in the next day or so. And thanks again, everybody, for being here. I think at the top of it, we had 90 participants. So that's great for us. We're really excited. And thanks, guys.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.